Order. Terry, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Schultz?
Here.
Trustee Burroway?
Here.
Trustee Humphert?
Here.
Trustee Faber?
Here.
Trustee Teeter?
Here.
Trustee Stevens?
Here.
President Ritter?
Here. We're going to rise for a Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for an invocation from Pastor Ball. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pastor Ball.
Thank you. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we just come humbly before you tonight. We thank you for this day that you've given us to live in, and we rejoice and are thankful for all the opportunities today that we've had to share your glory. And tonight we just pray your blessings over this meeting. May your spirit abide over this house, and may you just continue to bless all our endeavors, our agenda, every proclamation, every new business, old business, may be covered by you. And Father, let your will be done tonight on earth as it already is in heaven. We pray all these prayers in your name. Amen.
Okay, we have no proclamations, congratulatory resolutions, or awards this evening. We do have a swearing in of full-time firefighter Paramedic Kevin Leahy. So we'll turn this over to the president of our Fire and Police Commission, Mr. DeLong. We also have one of the members, Morgan Bergquist, here for the swearing in. You can come forward too, Morgan.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kevin Leahy.
I, Kevin Leahy.
Do solemnly swear and affirm
Do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the ordinances of the Village of Carpentersville and the County of Kane.
and the ordinances of the Village of Carpentersville and the County of Kane.
I will also abide by the rules and regulations of the Carpentersville Fire Department
I will also abide by the rules and regulations of the Carpentersville Fire Department
and the orders and directives of the Chief of the Department,
and the orders and directives of the Chief of the Department,
and I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of Carpentersville Firefighter
the duties of the office of Carpentersville Firefighter
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, sir. Welcome aboard.
Kevin, before you get too far away, if you have friends or, not friends, but relatives or that you'd like to introduce, your pinner and anybody else that's in your family,
My wife Liz, my family.
you can go ahead and give their names out.
Oh, sure. My mother Maureen, that's my sister-in-law Mary, my mother, my sister-in-law Christine, my sister-in-law Becky.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
We just wanted to give a little bio on Kevin. Kevin grew up in Chicago on the northwest side. Shortly before graduating high school, he became interested in being a firefighter. He finished his EMT school at Wright College in Chicago and became a paramedic through the Malcolm X College in Chicago. We're very happy to have Kevin on board and as our number 33rd firefighter. So we're excited about that. Go ahead.
And I just want to take a minute, President Ritter. First of all, hey, I'm incredibly proud to have you to get through that oath with all these eyes on you without stuttering. And I just hope you're proud to be here. Come to us with exceptional credentials, and more than anything, the short time that we've had him on board, we were so that every record, nothing but incredibly positive attitude. So really refreshing. Thanks to the guys for being here. Congratulations.
And as is our normal custom, if you're only here for the swearing in, we'll take about 2 minutes for those of you who want to leave, so you don't have to stay for the whole meeting. You're welcome to if you want to, but otherwise we'll take 2-minute break while you go ahead and exit. Okay, Terry, do we have any commenters this evening? Several?
Two.
Two? Okay, then I'll go through my normal admonishments at this time. You have 5 minutes. You're not to address individual trustees or staff members. Since it is election season, I will remind you that Village Hall is politically neutral. Please do not make any comments that would be considered political in nature. If you have asked any questions of the board, they would be answered tomorrow at the direction of the manager, who would have appropriate staff contact you. And please confine yourselves to village business. I will also mention that commenters are asked not to make political statements. The board is likewise admonished not to make political statements during the course of the meeting, as we are also politically neutral up here at the board. Who is our first commenter this evening?
Gerry Wille.
Good evening. I'd just like to take a few minutes to strongly encourage your support for the proposed new Route 31 Old Town TIF district and the transferring of the remaining Spring Hill Industrial TIF funds into this new TIF. Over the past several years, much has been accomplished to improve the overall image of Carpentersville by providing a better family environment and at the same time working to expand our commercial base. The steps so far could not have been accomplished without this board's leadership, encouragement, and diligence, along with staff's hard work. However, there is much that still needs to be done. And the proposed new TIF, along with the funds from the industrial TIF, represents an important opportunity to generate new revenue and capitalize on the good work already accomplished. Some of the most valuable commercial real estate in the village is within the proposed Route 31 and Old Town TIF district, but there are several properties that have been non-productive for nearly a decade. With the scheduled improvements of the Huntley Road and Route 31 intersection, there will be opportunities for redevelopment, and the proposed TIF could provide a cash infusion to spur growth that would ensure the success of that area. Funds were also needed for the Old Town redevelopment plan to improve stormwater management, make riverfront improvements, and ensure traffic safety, all of which were requested by the residents during the long planning process for this area. The combination of these TIFs will give Carpentersville the ability to leverage these dollars many times over through the use of matching grants from federal and state agencies. This will provide the opportunity to make the promise of the Old Town plan a reality with its new riverfront parks, bicycle paths, and greenway connection to Carpenter Park, all of which are waiting for funds, along with the ability to generate a greater revenue from real estate that is currently sitting idle or is drastically underused. There is an urgency to the use of these funds in a productive manner because of the uncertainty of the level of state funds due to their ongoing budget issues. It will make the accomplishment of these goals more difficult if Springfield significantly reduces their participation. Again, I strongly urge you to support the Route 31 Old Town TIF and its combination with the Spring Hill Industrial TIF so that Carpentersville can continue to grow and prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. I will point out that Gerry is a member of the Business Development Commission here at the village. Thank you, Gerry, for your remarks. Next speaker, Terry.
Humberto Garcia.
Good afternoon, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, President Reeder. Last Saturday, you witnessed what was an abuse, was an assault, and was a terrible way to talk to a village president.
You're a candidate now. Are you making a political statement?
I am not. As a resident, I was mistreated, I was talked down, and I was insulted. Personally insulted. I will not use the language that I was used, that most of you heard. I am extremely embarrassed to say that one of our officials treat people like that. I believe now all the claims that I have heard of the abuse of power, I think it's absolutely wrong. Carpentersville should be ashamed of treating people like that. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. Anybody else, Terry? Okay. Ready for our regular consent agenda items. All items listed on the consent agenda will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of those items unless a trustee so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Any items to be removed?
No motion to pass the consent agenda.
Motion Paul, second Kay. Terry, please call. Oh, sure. Oh, we have one.
Mr. President, yeah,
I
want to just clarify for the movement and seconder, item D under this agenda, there's a revised resolution at your desk. I'd like to just confirm that your motion is to approve it as amended.
I saw the revised part of item D, and I'm okay with amending my...
Okay, just want to note that for the record, Mr. President.
Okay, so the motioner and second agree to have it as amended. Correct. So Terry, call the roll as amended for item D.
Trustee Burroway,
Yes.
Trustee Humper,
Yes.
Trustee Rayberg,
Yes.
Trustee Teeter. Yes. Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Schultz.
Yes.
Okay, we're ready for reports of the manager, officers, commissions, and staff, and we're going to have the manager first. This might get a little long, so staff or commissions remind me at the end in case I skip over, as I tend to do. Mark?
Well, this is the Joe Wade evening. Joe has got A, B, C, and D tonight that he will, I think if you wanted to do D first so you could get into the bigger ones, didn't you, Joe?
Actually, first item I have is I'd like to report to the board that they'll be coming to our March 31st meeting, but village staff has been working with the Chamber of Commerce to hold a summer event, and it's with the cooperation of Auto Engineering. It would be Saturday, July 18th in the Northeast Auto parking lot. And it's a pretty special event. It's the Chamber's 35th anniversary. So they're putting together an outdoor event. It would entail live music, bands. It would also have food vendors, a business exposition of a number of Chamber businesses, and also a food court and a beer garden. So they'll be coming to the board the next meeting, March 31st. And there's a special event permit. We will also be asking for the closure of Wisconsin Avenue around Triangle Park. I think the initial plan is to incorporate Triangle Park into some of the festivities. And I think it's really a nice effort of the Chamber of Commerce, because also, too, this is the season we lost Carpenter Park. So we lost the music festival. We lost a number of things that we would have in Carpenter Park. So hopefully this will help bring the community together for a fun day. And then the other...
Just on that same note, though, if there are any groups that want to have a community event, we have some space available, and if you contact Joe, we can try to find alternative spots. So since we cannot use the park, we'll help you if we can find a spot on public property where you can have an event. So, sorry, Joe.
And thank you. To point out, as an example, coming, I think it's May 20th, we'll have it's a larger event that the Carpentersville Rotary Club is doing in conjunction with the Village, Park District, Boys and Girls Club, a number of other agencies, and that's for that annual end of school year celebration, kickoff to summer. And we will be hosting that and basically in our grounds in front of the Village Hall, as we do with National Night Out. But the Park District has also authorized the use of Meadowdale Park as well. And that's a good example of us trying to find another site for a good event. The next item on the agenda is I think it's an exciting idea. It's Spring Hill Mall redevelopment update. As you're aware, the Rouse Corporation has been looking at the future of Spring Hill Mall, and we have representatives from New York. Eric Dinnenberg is here. Amy Prue, the Spring Hill Mall manager, Ken Bussey, they're one of their consultants, and Daryl Davidson, their attorney. So at that, I'll turn it over. This is, as you're aware, this is similar to a proposal that was made before the West Dundee Village Board a couple weeks ago. And Rouse Corporation is looking to give you an idea of what they have in mind, and also to ask the village about a public-private partnership. So at that, I'll turn it over to their team.
Good evening, everybody. President Ritter and the Board of Trustees, Mr. Rooney, Mr. Wade, good to see you guys. Pleasure being here. Thank you for having us. We're here tonight, and I spoke to yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Just to start, if we could have easel over here, just so that as the residents and the viewers could also see the proposal.
Sure.
They're okay with it. Sorry, are you guys?
And if you turn it
And
so
so
the
the
camera
camera, more than anything, we want the people in town to see it. This will be broadcast. Oh, don't get nervous just because you're on TV.
I brought the wrong tie for the event this evening. First of all, I got ahead of myself. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Eric Dinnenberg. I'm the Vice President of Development for Rouse Properties. We are based out of New York City. We are the owners of Spring Hill Mall. We have been the owners of Spring Hill Mall since 2012. And just to give you a little background on Rouse Properties, who we are, we became our own public company in 2012, so we just completed our third year of being our own public company. We own 36 malls across the country. These are generally regional malls, with 2 or 3 anchors, inline shops, just like Spring Hill Mall, and we own them all throughout the country. The one place we don't own them is New York, which isn't great for, or it's good for the airline industry for us, but or for them, I should say, but difficult to be convenient at times. Yes.
I'm going to stop you just one second. There's a lot of people are behind there. If any of you feel like moving over to these empty seats, just do it right now. Don't feel like you have to sit there just because that's where you sat, and take advantage and move now, and then we'll start back up.
Yeah, yeah.
There are a lot of good things about a round place, but this is not one of them. Don't be bashful, the whole front row's open, and you get to actually see what's on there.
But I have documents. Oh, yes, I have some.
Sorry to make you start over so many times.
Not a
Eric, but
problem, please. We're here so the public can see this. So
this is a big turnout for us, so
Yeah.
bigger than usual, so that's good.
Good.
Yeah, mine too.
Aching so bad.
Okay, Eric, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Again, thank you for having me tonight. And I spoke about a month ago to the village of West Dundee, introducing the project then as well. And I'll frame this the same way. This is a kind of a culmination of really a year and a half, more than that, frankly. I've been with Rouse for 2 years, and pretty much from day one, this has been a focus of my efforts and our executive team's efforts. So we've worked with staff and Mr. Wade and Mr. Rooney and President Ritter, Mr. Passman on trying to come up with a program here that we think the mall can be proud of, that makes the mall into a viable destination for retail and entertainment and dining for years to come, and something that the community can be proud of. So tonight, we'll update you on the plan. We'll talk to the specific request for assistance that we need in order to launch this program and this redevelopment. And then I do believe we've submitted a resolution for your consideration as well. So we'll walk through everything, and certainly any questions you have, I am here, our consultant, Mr. Bussey, our attorney, Mr. Davidson, we're available to take any questions. For those who know the mall, and my guess is most do know the mall, at times it's been a very difficult go over the last few years. This is not necessarily unique to this area, and it's really not unique to the mall industry and the retail industry in general. Certainly in the last 5-10 years, the retail industry, the mall landscape is changing. We have competition from big box retailers such as Walmart and Target. Here particularly, we have competition from Randall Road and that retail road. And really in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, but particularly the last 5 years, we have competition from e-commerce and Amazon and those like. So we're dealing with competition all over the place. So what this is it's a challenge to companies like mine. It's not good enough anymore to say, well, you know, this is how retail worked 20 years ago, so this is how retail is going to work 20 years from now. We have to change how these properties, how these malls function. Sometimes I even get a little bit concern using the word mall, because in many ways the mall, as we know it and as 15, 20, 25 years ago as we've known it, it's different now. You used to have kind of 4 anchors and a couple wings, and that was your mall, and people went there because that was where you had to go shopping, and there weren't many other options. It's simply not the case anymore. It's pretty easy to go down the street and go to Walmart or go to Target and get everything you need and go home. Even easier to sit on your couch and do it on your iPhone and not have to do any of that. So the question is, how do we provide a destination point for the community? How do we provide something that the community can be proud of, something that the community wants to go to spend a Friday, Saturday evening, a Saturday afternoon with their family? And so the formula has changed, and we think in order to keep Spring Hill Mall viable into the future, and by the future I don't mean 5 years down the road, I mean 15, 20, 25 years down the road, how do we affect change on Spring Hill particularly? For those who know Spring Hill, and I'm going to point a little bit as well, if you can't hear me or if I drift, just let me know. For those who know Spring Hill, the area of focus for this project is really the former J.C. Penney anchor. It is currently a vacant anchor. So it provides a practical opportunity for us to quickly come in, invest, and do what we call really affect the multiplier effect throughout the shopping center. This is a rising tide lifts all boats argument, which is challenges, struggles that the mall may have. They don't discriminate between municipality boundaries. If we have trouble in one wing of the mall, over time that trouble is going to continue, or that challenge, I should say, is going to continue to impact the rest of the mall. This is a practical opportunity to us with the vacant anchor to affect change, and what we think is going to be pretty positive and pretty immediate change. And how do we do that? We do that by bringing uses to the mall that don't currently exist today, but more importantly, we look to bring something to the community that we don't think currently exists today. And our proposal that many of you are familiar with is really to create an entertainment, dining, and more lifestyle-oriented destination point. So we're being very focused in how we're spending our dollars and where we're investing. We never try to bite off more than we can chew. We want to impact positive change as immediately as possible, and we're quite confident with these changes that the impact will not simply be contained to the area where you see the physical improvements occurring, but rather the entire site, and that the small shop shoe salesman located in the interior of the mall, or the Macy's anchor, or the Kohl's anchor, they're going to feel that benefit of being a part of something that is changing and providing the community and the consumers in this area with uses that they want and they desire for their family, for their entertainment, for a cumulative shopping, dining, and entertainment experience. Just to give some more flavor to the improvements, what we're proposing is a new entertainment theater use. This will have access from the exterior of the theater. We will create a pedestrian-friendly plaza right in front of the theater. We'll create new exterior accessible restaurant and dining options. And then kind of the third component of that is We're going to be coming into the mall a bit, really up through the food court area. We want to create more exterior accessible, more pedestrian-friendly, more visible spaces. So we will turn that space inside out so that you'll be able to access those shops directly from the exterior. The goal here is to create a much more green area, an area that you want to not only congregate but maybe spend a couple hours on a nice day, such as I heard the weather here was about 70 degrees yesterday. I came one day too late. But on a day like that, spend some time outside, see a movie, have dinner. The goal is to create an area where you not only want to come to shop, but maybe spend a few hours, do your shopping, dining, go see a movie, create an atmosphere where it's no longer just come to get your daily needs, but really something you can be proud of, a place you want to be, and that's really our goal here. The total investment that we're proposing is in the $37 million range, about $37.8 million. We are requesting assistance of approximately $8.9 million. That's the total assistance requested to help us launch this project. Now, that 8.9 is a partnership not only with us, but with the Village of West Dundee as well. Within that 8.9, the direct request to the Village of Carpentersville is $1.3 million. And Ken has brought some charts that we'll present as well. I know there's been some confusion about, what the actual request is, how the split is, everything like that. Hopefully we'll make it very clear exactly what that is, but those are the basic numbers. And I do want to stress, I know I've had some frank conversations with staff here and with staff at West Dundee as far as, where the actual physical improvements are taking place. We have a practical opportunity here with the vacant box. The vacant box happens to fall primarily within the boundaries of West Dundee, but I want to be clear, we're not doing this to impact positive change on West Dundee. We're doing this to impact positive change on Spring Hill Mall. And both communities, the mall and this particular node here, this particular retail and entertainment node, it benefits not just this area that we're making the physical improvements, but rather that entire area. We really believe in the multiplier effect. We've done several projects at Ralph's that you guys are more than welcome to look into. We've done a recent project at Mall St. Vincent in Shreveport, Louisiana, where we looked at the market and what was missing there, and we kind of took an outdated enclosed mall and really created kind of a lifestyle, exterior accessible lifestyle center. We currently finished up a project just outside of Minneapolis, where we took, again, an enclosed mall that was in dire straits, and we turned that into a grocery-anchored power center with a Nordstrom Rack and a grocer and an Ulta. So we're looking what's missing from the market. What has not been addressed in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and how do we bring that to the consumer today and to the communities today? And we've had tremendous success with that, and I can go over a number of other projects. This is really our specialty, where we have the age of the department store, I think as we know it, is changing. We certainly don't need 200,000 square foot two-level department stores anymore. People want more tailored options, and they want different kinds of uses in these old footprints. So that's exactly what this does. We didn't think it was in the best interest to come back here necessarily with that same old formula. Let's try something new. But it is important. As a public company, we do have certain return hurdles that we do need to meet for our shareholders. And these improvements are not cheap. We're doing something that is a new formula, and that's why we've made this request for the assistance in order to help us make this an economically viable project for the company. So again, just to reiterate, the assistance, the total assistance is $8.9 million. That's on a $37 million spend. The assistance from Carpentersville is $1.3 million. It equates to roughly 85% West Dundee, 15% Carpentersville. And with that, I'm certainly available for questions. Mr. Bussey is here. We can go through whatever you guys want to go through.
If I may add also, too, Jeff Dickinson, who is here for the the proposed Old Town Route 31 TIF, has also reviewed at least some of the initial documents from Rouse Properties as well, and he's available for questioning. He's familiar with it. So if any of you have questions to direct to Mr. Dickinson as the village's development advisor.
Paul? Thank you guys for coming tonight. We appreciate it very much. And this is an important project because of Kohl's and Carson's. These two stores are very important to our village. They bring in a lot of revenue, and as you probably know, as part of the mall, they generate a lot of sales tax revenue for the entire mall. So from our perspective, we're helping these two stores. Even though that not a lot of this area is going to be directly in Carpentersville, I think we've talked about it enough amongst ourselves one-on-one that we realize that we have to participate in this endeavor to help Kohl's and Carson's. I do have a couple questions about the structure of this, the $1.3 million. And I'm going to reference some early documents that we received. And thank you for clarifying that that's what the ask is from the Village of Carpentersville. But do you anticipate taking a bond out on top of the TIF that we're going to create for this area?
I don't believe, Ken, can you speak to that? I don't believe that's part of our request here.
that is not the ask.
Okay.
The ask would be notes issued to the developer and secured by the future incremental property tax, incremental sales tax.
Okay.
West Dundee might do something a little different and offer something there, but right now it's just.
So based on the TIF request, the ask, you're okay with the increment that will generate from the taxes that'll be gathered by the TIF, then that's how we could fund our share.
That's correct, and I'm glad that we're bringing up this point. I want to stress that point, but as well that there's no request here for upfront money, which I know had been a point of clarification. We have had discussions with West Dundee, candidly, on that front, but that is not part of the request of Carpentersville.
Okay, and then my next question is making this a destination, are you guys comfortable that with the changes that you're going to make in the mall, that you're going to be able to create that destination where people are going to want to go there? I wonder if you could elaborate maybe a little bit more on what you're thinking relative to that. Is there any other things that are going on in the region that concern you relative to making this successful?
Sure. You know, first of all, we're not recreating the wheel with this formula. There are mall owners, there are developers who are aware of this very same need. That we need to bring more of a broader array of uses and options for consumers to have within their own communities. One thing is very clear here. Are there some challenges in the market? Sure, but you know, it's nothing I think necessarily unique to this particular area. There was a pretty hefty recession, as we all know, that hit this country, and it particularly hit the consumer, and it hit kind of the everyday American more than anybody. You're seeing some box vacancy along Randall Road. You're seeing some other vacancy. We think the mall has a built-in advantage, right, which is we have this grand scale that we can do something on. There's not many properties out there that have a footprint such as we have to really think outside the box. Hey, how can we change this and do so on a scale that becomes a destination point for people? It would be really difficult to take a 10,000 square foot box and affect real change. We think with the scale that we have here, the canvas that we have to work with, we're talking about best of class operators that we're talking to be a part of this project. And also, we think scaling this mall appropriately, giving it an exterior presence. You know, people are getting smarter. You can't just kind of herd people into an enclosed a structure anymore. They want to feel like they're part of more of that town center, that lifestyle feel, that they, if they want, can conveniently go into an exterior accessible space, or they can sit out in a plaza for a while and have lunch, or they can go to a movie. But it's very important that in an area, that in an era of the iPhone and Amazon, that you're only not providing the option to go buy a good, but rather really go to have an experience. And that's what we're trying to create here, and we think that this canvas and this opportunity allows us to do that.
Quick question, and you're talking about the new parts, but the old parts of the mall, are you planning like a themed? You don't have to reveal it because I know that's a secret, but are you planning that a lot of the stores will have a coordinated idea? And I'll just say like Spring Hill Mall and Outlet Center, and you're going to have outlet shops in there or something like that that will turn the rest of the mall into something different.
You know, we haven't had specific conversations about an overall theme, like an outlet theme or something of that nature. But let me be clear on one point here. Of the $37 million that we're talking about, a portion of that, Ken, off the top of my head, about $7 million or so for the inside of the mall?
Yes.
Is investing in new tenants, attractive tenants on the inside of the mall. So there is, as part of this $37 million investment, a re-tenanting of the existing mall. National brands that are more relevant to today's shopper and things that people routinely ask us for. We can't reveal particular tenants right now, but those negotiations and discussions are ongoing. I think what you're going to see, President Ritter, is a tenant role here that caters more to what people want today. I think sometimes, whether it's because of lease terms, long leases, people just kind of getting used to the status quo, there's a hesitancy to kind of shake things up and move on with some new names, guys with new ideas, new innovations, new names, and those are the types of tenants that we want to attract here. So while I don't think we're talking about, a rebranding on the scale of, say, an outlet concept, I think what we're looking to do here is to create entertainment, dining, fast fashion, things that people, basic things that people are looking for today that isn't being currently served in this market right here.
Okay. And then you're not asking for upfront money, you're asking for a note, but the money from the note would come for the parts of the mall within Carpentersville that will be TIF'd?
It will be generated. I'm going to turn this over to Ken to speak. Sure.
You're going to TIF parts of Carpentersville's portion of the mall?
They request us to do so.
Or request us to do?
Ken, do you want to speak to exactly what is generating the income here, or generating the assistance, I should say?
Okay. This illustration includes the parcels that are being directly impacted by the redevelopment project. They include the interior mall, the proposed theater, an outlot that would replace the JCPenney, and then the reconfigured southwest entranceway. These parcels are large, so they extend into these other areas. This red indicates the boundary of the villages. But in our discussions with Joe Wade and Mark Rooney, with respect to what the village of Carpentersville would like to do elsewhere in this area, the village is looking at a larger area that extends north. Right now, what West Dundee is concentrating on is this area. The village boundary complicates this matter. And you can see where the red boundary comes here, goes over here and cuts through. All right, so, but just to give you an idea, this interior mall space right here contains over 50,000 square feet of retail. And then the balance of it, of course, is in the West Dundee side. But there will be new tenants and re-tenanting of tenants and relocation of tenants that are all happening within this mall. And so they've got to happen together, irrespective of where village boundary lies.
I do want to be clear on one thing. We didn't pick this project based on where the village boundary was. The fact is, if you see a portion of the theater footprint falls within Carpentersville, that's just how it fell because that's what felt right for the plan. We need to do what's right for the shopping center and for the plan, and it so happens that as a practical matter, this is how that was split. We happen to have a vacant anchor and kind of a bigger canvas to work with that happens to fall, at least a majority happens to fall in West Dundee. But again, the success or challenges that this mall has over the next 10, 15 years isn't going to say, well, you know, we're at the Carpentersville line here, let's stop. It's gonna spread throughout, whether that's good or bad. We think in terms of impacting a positive change and putting us on a road to success, this is the area that allows us to do that the quickest, and it's the area that allows us to do it with the most certainty.
I would like to just point out on this illustration, the gold represents Rouse properties and the blue are the other. Now that doesn't show up all that well with this aerial, so together this separate parcel map. So it shows the extent to which the Rouse properties are on both sides of the boundary. And then the blue is basically all other. This is Huntley Road, 31, 72, Jewel, Macy's, Sears, Carson's, Kohl's, the Home Depot up here. But the heart of the mall is right in the middle of where the boundaries intersects the mall. And an interesting note, and Eric had touched on this earlier, is that when you examine, pull this down for a moment, what is happening here in terms of a new theater, a reconfiguration of the southwest entranceway, a new retail outlet, and then the plaza here, both by the theater, and then a plaza here opening up retail to the outdoors, and then a reconfiguration and re-tenanting of the interior mall space. When we look at what is being done on the village of Carpentersville side and the village of West Dundee side, it ends up working out rather interesting in that 14% of the reconfigured, re-tenanted and new retail space is on the Carpentersville side, and then the other 86% on the West Dundee side. And the ask is essentially the same, 15% coming from Carpentersville and 85% coming from West Dundee.
Again, we're talking about, in that graphic there, physical improvements, right? Physical spend, the actual dollar investment, physical improvements. But if we're talking about Kohl's and Carson's and the Carpentersville portion of that, we're doing this for the shopping center. We're doing it for Kohl's. We're doing it for Carson's. We're doing it for the Carpentersville portion of the shopping center. Put the boundary line out of it for a second. We think this is the best formula to get this mall going in the direction it needs to go. And I do also want to point out that we are as attentive to the Carpentersville portion of the project, even though we don't think about it that way. We have the Panera Bread that's set to open in just over a week here. We're very excited about that. We've gotten tremendous feedback from the community on that. And these are the kinds of improvements that we want to continue regardless of this project. We'll continue to actively lease and improve all of our space, no matter where it falls.
Pat, you had your hand up earlier.
I did, but I think you might have answered it. You're already actively pursuing some retailers out there?
We are.
Are you? So, because, Joe, if you don't mind me mentioning, we've had good conversation. Joe's explained to me, it's easier to say out there, we got to bring business to town, we got to fill our storefronts, than than it can be. It's easier said than done. So with us, I guess I was just wondering if you are taking into account the demographics of the area too. Our median average income here is a little lower than a lot of others, and but we certainly, I believe, have a great deal of traffic at that mall. So is that something that you're keeping in mind when you're doing your research for the retailers?
We wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't, because we're not, you can't fool a retailer these days. Retailers have access to data and information that they never had before, and we have the same thing. So it would be, malpractice on our part, and frankly, not a very good strategy if we weren't considering that. But we still think that even in this community, the demographic that you're referring to, people still want to be able to enjoy a Saturday evening with their family. They want to be able to stroll through the mall. We've completed some improvements over the last year in the center court area, trying to make that a bit more family-friendly, community-oriented. We've installed Samsung Galaxy tablets in the common area there, some nicer furniture, the coffee bar. We're really looking to attract families. People want to feel good about being at Spring Hill Mall. And in terms of your specific question, we're absolutely taking it into consideration. We wouldn't be doing our job if we weren't.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Oh, Kevin, you had your hand up too, but, okay, Kay?
Well, I had a question. I know that on the Carpentersville section of the redevelopment area, just in general, we have a blighted building, the Rosati's building, that everybody's aware of. That's a very big eyesore. And that is not in Ralph's properties, but it is within the mall area. But we've had interest in that building, and we've had interest in development there, but there's a covenant that is on the property that has not allowed us to have that building taken over, and actually, and that's actually been years now that we've actually inquired about that with difficult, if no response back regarding that situation. Are you aware of what I'm talking about?
Are you asking about the hamburger covenant specifically?
Right.
The restriction? I think we've indicated a willingness to release that restriction as part of this agreement.
Because personally, because it has been such a challenge.
Sure.
And there's nobody that doesn't drive by the mall, and that's, people see the thing that's wrong sometimes before they see the thing that's wrong.
Sure, sure. And let me just say that we don't, that covenant and that restriction, and we have other covenants and restrictions with other properties, we don't do that to be, first of all, we inherited that, but
Exactly. I know
we don't do it to be nasty people or mean neighbors. We do have a responsibility to look out for the best interest of the mall, and certainly in a very competitive market right now, and I mean that in this specific market, and just competing for retailers and restaurant users in general, and people are pretty aggressive out there on how they do that. Those covenants exist to try to keep the best interest of the mall in mind. So, for example, if a hamburger user was to go there, is it more difficult for the mall to attract a potential hamburger user, which we think would be a nice, accompaniment to some of the things we're doing at the mall. That being said, as part of this proposal and as part of this proposed agreement, we've indicated a willingness to release that restriction. We understand the concerns of the village. We're certainly appreciative that the village is considering our request, and we will do the same, and we've indicated that we will release that restriction.
Okay, because personally, having been chairman of the Business Development Commission and seen businesses come and go, that would be a high stipulation on my part for
Sure.
that approval.
Yep, and we understand it, and we're on board.
I'm going to ask a very pointed question. There was a rumor that the only way that covenant would be released is if somebody bought it out. Would that be the way you would consider releasing it, or would you just sign off when this is done?
That rumor certainly, the only person who can speak to that is me, and that is not, I don't know where that came from, frankly. Assuming that we go forward with the agreement here for the request, we will release that hamburger restriction.
Well, I appreciate that, because that was one of those rumors. How do you fight a rumor unless you go to the guy that has a real answer?
I'm here to dispel that rumor.
Thank you. Kevin, did you have your hand up?
Yeah,
earlier?
I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the precedents that you had cited in your presentation, Mall St. Vincent and another mall outside Minneapolis. What were the total investments that you put into those two properties? Were they in the same ballpark as Spring Hill Mall, or were they more or less?
Sure. I will say, Mall St. Vincent was on the less side. It just happens to be a smaller project. We were impacting it. It was a different project. We were really just kind of activating the exterior. There wasn't necessarily this heavy demolition and kind of the scale of the project we're talking about. I will say that Spring Hill would be one of our biggest investments to date. We are currently under construction on a project in Springfield, Oregon. We're under construction on a project in Newark, California. This would be more towards that level of spend. The project in Minneapolis was in the $30 million range. Mall St. Vincent was on a much lower end scale, but just kind of give you a flavor of what we're able to do. We're pretty proud of those two projects, so I just wanted to offer them up as just kind of examples here. But certainly this will be one of our top 3 or 4 spends in our portfolio. And, we're going on completing somewhere in the neighborhood of, 15 to 20 projects by the end of 2016. So that's pretty high up in terms of the level of investment. We're very serious about Spring Hill. We believe in the mall. We believe in this market. But these changes are expensive, and when you're kind of changing a formula, it's even more expensive. And that's why the assistance is so important.
So for that redevelopment that you did outside Minneapolis, is about a $30 million project. Did that also involve bringing new stores in?
It did. It did.
What type of stores did you bring in? What type of success did you have? Because I think that's really the key to this overall project is what type of stores do you bring in?
Sure. And let me preface that by saying different market, different project, so different intent there. But we have that project will actually be having its grand opening shortly. It'll be a Nordstrom Rack, Ulta Cosmetics, Dress Barn, Panera Bread, GNC. So what we think are kind of best-in-class tenants. I want to take that best-in-class moniker and apply that to Spring Hill, not necessarily the tenant names, because here again, our focus particularly in the area in the JCPenney footprint, again, we're going for that entertainment and dining use. Same kind of best-in-class operators that you see there. Maybe a different use or different field, maybe not the exact same genre. But again, those types of tenants who are going to come in and people are going to feel good about being there. They're going to receive great customer service. They're going to see a great product. That's who we want to be here.
Okay. And then assuming these move forward on your timetables, when do you look to break ground? When are you looking to conclude the project?
Sure. I addressed this a little bit at the West Dundee, when I presented this to West Dundee. I think our goal right now, and again, we're in active discussions with tenants, so that will be, that will push it a little bit. It's somewhat dependent on finalizing those discussions. We obviously have an entitlement process we'll go through, but I think ideally we'd like to be looking to start demolition later this summer and really get this project cranking towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, with our eye on, say, mid to late 2016 for more of a kind of grand opening launch.
Kevin, were you done?
Yeah.
I want to just the finances, I still want to make sure I have this exactly right in my head here. We would not upfront the money. It would come as TIF monies became available. We would pay off the $1.3 million to you, not with interest or anything like that. It would just be $1.3 million, and we pay it off as it comes in.
Correct. Now, I think the 1.3 is the present value. Correct.
Present value.
Yes.
It would be interest, but on a simple interest basis. If there is insufficient funds in any one year to pay interest, that interest then just goes to next year and is first paid, and then, but the interest does not accrue to principal. So other loans, if you didn't pay,
right, it doesn't balloon or roll over, so to speak.
It doesn't
right.
Escalate.
Okay, and then interest would be negotiated.
Yes.
As part of the deal.
Yes,
okay.
I think the clarity here, I'd turn to the Attorney, you're asking us tonight if there's a consensus to move forward to pass a resolution that normally in our parlance of development, an inducement resolution from a date starting till we finish a development agreement that specifies all the details that you'd want to see and they'd want to see. We just start that hard if you want to explain a little more.
Sure.
And we're not committing tonight, we're just getting your direction. Should we move forward and create the next document and continue to work with the team?
Right.
From our perspective, this gives us the confidence that we know we have the board behind us. We understand we're going to flesh out the details with staff, and we'll do that over the next several months. But at least this gives us the confidence that we have the board's confidence, number one, and the board's support, and that we can move forward towards a final resolution on it.
If I may, Mr.
go ahead.
President, to answer that question, it's just that an inducement resolution, it's not a requirement under the law for this type of agreement. It is a development tool, and it is a tool primarily for the developer to do just as Mr. Denenberg said. It gives them some assurances that there is at least something they're working toward. It gives them the potential ability to recover some of the costs in this next planning phase as part of whatever public-private partnership is ultimately reached. Passing the inducement resolution does not obligate the village. If you pass the inducement resolution, it doesn't obligate the village to ultimately enter into any kind of development agreement. And likewise, failure to adopt an inducement resolution doesn't preclude the parties from reaching the public-private partnership agreement. It is just that. It is a tool. We would, and I know there may be some more questions. I don't want to jump to the end yet, but I know that the staff in our office would like to know if that's something, that resolution, the board would like us to work on with Rouse's counsel for your next meeting. It's something to think about, but that's the only thing that the only direction we're looking for is whether we, staff and our office, should continue to engage both Rouse Properties as well as the Village of West Dundee in this effort. And if so, then we'll take the appropriate steps according to your direction.
And look, this is a performance-based business. You know, we need to generate these funds. We need to deliver on what we say, or the assistance isn't there. So at the end of the day, we have to perform, irrespective of what the documents say. We have to perform.
Okay. Are there any additional questions, Kay?
Well, I just didn't know if we should get any feedback from our SP Friedman representative as far as like TIF, because our particular area, as we're applying for TIF independently of West Dundee, I mean, we're not going to have one that we're commingling of funds from different communities. So how does that process work, and do we have to separately qualify? Because our Coles and our Carsons is doing so well, would we then qualify for, because TIF, you have to show some need to be able to institute a TIF district. Isn't that correct?
Those are very good questions, and this I'm going to turn over to Jeff Dickinson of SB Friedman, our development advisor, and he's taken a cursory look at that. We really haven't got into the negotiation phase with Rouse Properties, but at least he's familiar with at least kind of the structure that's being proposed, and he might be able to offer his initial thoughts on some of the pros and cons of the structure of how we proceed, and maybe also for the board and the public to give a sense of what are the things that we will be looking at in evaluating the request. So.
Sure. To start with your question about eligibility, you're exactly right. In order to provide TIF assistance to the developer, we would have to make independent funding, we being the village, I should say you more accurately, with our recommendation, we'd have to make independent eligibility findings about whatever that boundary is. So the facts are subject to evaluation. We have looked at the age of the building, and that helps. The building is old enough that, and you'll hear in our conversation later today, age +3, there's a lower threshold, if you will, the non-blight threshold. So that's a promising fact that we believe is accurate, subject to some more homework. So, but you're absolutely right. We'd have to make that recommendation. You'd have to make that finding in order to establish a district to use TIF as a tool. So that's step one. And we're not all the way there. I have no reason to think we can or can't. We don't know yet. More broadly, to the proposed structure of the transaction, I mean, I think the point about it being a performance-based agreement is usually something that village boards are much more comfortable with. Obviously, putting up money up front is just puts more risk on your taxpayers and on you, and people don't like to do that. So that's a comfortable structure. I think that note structure that they described is pretty traditional. We would have to do more due diligence. I mean, I think we're starting to understand from their preliminary submittal more about what they need and why they need it. We want to vet that more thoroughly and understand that. We also want to understand the increment. I think this is a question that President Ritter was asking. Where's the increment coming from? And exactly, we're not going to know exactly, but those projections. And again, their team is going to present those projections, and we're going to evaluate those assumptions. It's all, at some level, an assumptions-based game. I mean, these folks operate malls. They know what happens. And I think your questions about the case studies can be helpful to explain. Are we going to see a 10% growth in sales or a 15% growth in the existing stores? There's all sorts of questions to dig in on. But I think, broadly speaking, the framework that's being outlined seems feeling like a reasonable path forward, if that's helpful to you.
And to that point, you mentioned sales tax. That's another issue that we'll have to get into the details on. It's not fully
totally clear for me,
vetted right at the moment.
That's right. With the incremental property taxes and potentially, I guess I thought I heard the word sales tax, and again, I haven't seen it written down, so we've got to clarify that and sharpen that pencil.
Let me ask you one question. Would you be able to do a little more investigation and be able to be here on the 31st when we go, if the board agrees that we want to see this resolution of inducement, we might have more questions for you on the 31st. If you can have a little more information and maybe be a little bit better ready to give us a recommendation. Is that possible?
Is that enough time preliminary still? I mean, we can do, certainly we've looked at the properties already, so I'd have to be a little more systematic about it. It would be a little early. Let me check my calendar if you don't mind in front of the world.
No, that's fine. I'm sorry.
I can't.
That's a pretty quick ask on my part.
But it's very dependent on Rouse and Eric's team to get the information to, and I just don't know on the 31st, their ask is us to just establish that we want to go forward and tell the staff to work.
Yeah.
I do not believe in the next 10 days that you're going to have a development or pro forma that we can evaluate effectively to do what you're requesting. You've got a great question, and I just don't know that Rouse is going to have a pro forma that we can make that detailed analysis to have him answer the question you just asked him to do.
Well,
it's
just
not
be here to
him.
be a resource if we need you.
I may have to be in Missouri for another meeting. I think more broadly, and this is, I guess, not the most cautious legalistic, this sort of the development advisor guy hat here. There's no cost to an inducement resolution. No, and again, it's entirely within from a village perspective. There's, no obligation, no real risk. So
we can go ahead and do that, and then we could have you come at a more appropriate time and be
more thorough, and that's when the real decision is made by the board. Are we making a deal? The first one is good faith. We're going to work on it, but you won't have your homework done. I can't probably have my homework done, and so it's really we're willing to work on it. I think that's what you're saying.
As long as the board, they're the ones that have to agree to this. So as long as they understand that if the letter of inducement doesn't tie us up, and we can ask questions later, that's fine. Don't worry about it then.
Okay, very good.
All right. Other questions from the board?
I do answer.
Yeah.
Oh, Ginger,
I'm sorry. Yeah, you did. I'm sorry, Ginger.
I had one.
I forget about you down
Eric,
there.
well, Kevin was kind of leading in that direction, and I thought he was going to ask he did ask one of the questions that I wanted, but the other one that I was interested in, what is your occupancy rate currently in the Minnesota Mall?
I'm going to ask Amy Resch, who's our general manager. Do you know that off the top of your head? Oh, for the Minnesota property.
That's the one that, is that the?
Yeah, that's the 30
Mall
million.
St. Vincent?
No,
Mall St. Vincent's.
Mall St. Vincent is in Shreveport, Louisiana. We just finished that project.
Okay.
And then in
the
Minneapolis.
Minnesota Mall is open?
It is open. I should say, we actually sold that property. We are finishing up, so we redeveloped it. We sold it basically 95% of the way through the redevelopment. We are finishing the last 5% up now on behalf of the new owner. I would venture to say that is close to, 95% leased. It's a terrific, it was a terrific project, and we had great success with it. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's very good. Yeah, we and I think it'll probably be, frankly, close to 100% leased soon by the new owner. I do want to just say, going back to the inducement resolution, one of the important things for us is we're getting ready to spend quite a bit of money very soon here. We'd like to know that What this gives us confidence in is, okay, we can start spending this money, and we have a reasonable level of confidence that we can, I think, work through issues that you guys have and work through the details, and know that, you know, at the end of the rainbow, we can have this assistance there to help recoup these costs that we've already laid out and put forward as part of our investment. And we're getting ready to do that here really quickly, obviously on a schedule where we want to be taking buildings down, you know, later this
But
summer.
then, to be clear, the inducement resolution on the 31st, if you tell us to go forward, won't commit you to any dollar amounts or details with either party. It's just giving them the comfort that we are, as a board, gotten direction to the staff to do it, and the development agreement will specify
That's right.
all the sales tax versus property tax versus a TIF if it is eligible in those details. They're just trying to get a sense that the board is supportive, directing to go forward.
Would you agree, Mr. Rooney, that assuming there was an inducement resolution, Mr. Passman too, assuming there was an inducement resolution, that kind of starts the clock, should we reach a development agreement,
Yes.
that we can start spending costs confidently, and
That
if we
would
do reach
be
it.
recouped in the development agreement.
got
A
it.
starting point.
Okay, great, perfect, thank you.
Okay, Pat?
I don't, this is a smaller cog in a big picture here, and I don't want it to be something that you think we're focused on, but I would like, if we could, maybe Kay, if not to put you on the spot, for those folks at home that don't understand how a restaurant could have a covenant on it, and what it means exactly, and why it's been standing idle for so long, and you know that we've had people approach, but unfortunately they don't fit it. I was wondering if maybe you could explain it. And with that, if I could ask, even though it's not something that would happen tomorrow, when would we have to wait for your release for that? When the development's done? Or is that something that is such a smaller point we could get done and then it can start to be marketed at that point, finally?
We don't view it as a small point. The restriction exists, and just, you know, the restriction in this case says that you can't sell hamburgers
It's the covenant.
from
That's what I was looking for. Right.
from that property.
Right, so that's just
the
so
basic.
they know, that
yeah.
establishment was set up as pizza, Italian,
Right.
and no hamburgers are to be served there. And
Right.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or hot dogs.
Or hot
But-
dogs,
and
yeah.
that- A covenant is for somebody, it would be like on your title work at the property, at the county. It's not, and that was something that was put on when it was built in 1980.
Right.
So it's not something that they came in and slammed down their
Exactly.
heavy hand and
exactly.
said, okay, that's it. It's something that has been there for the entire history of the property. It's just when Rosati's went out, we did have an interested party, and it was a hamburger chain that was very well known. But because of the covenant, and at that time, there were not the powers to be able to release the covenant, we did have some conversation with the mall management. And there was also transfer of ownership in the process at that time as well. So that kind of made the waters a little bit murky as far as getting something done, because it was processes were going on. But there was big interest. And I'm going to say it was, go ahead, Joe.
If I could add, it's been a while since I looked at it, but I think the covenant might be a little bit more serious and restrictive than what maybe the common myth in the area is. My understanding, and Village Attorney Passman has looked at this too, my understanding is the covenant is the building must be used for a sit-down pizza restaurant. And when it was the prior pizza restaurant failed, that doesn't warrant a lot of interest from other pizza restaurants. So,
And the original restaurant pizza wasn't Rosati's, it was
Rocky Rococo, I believe.
out of Wisconsin, and they signed on to it. And 1980, what were you doing, Eric? I don't think you were on.
Well, Eric, obviously, this is a
It should have been Chicago pizza. Wisconsin pizza is not going to work.
But obviously, this is the third time that somebody's asked about this. You can understand, this has been a sore point for us for way before you owned this.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's better be sooner than later. As soon as you can let that go, the more you will make people up here happy. Let's just be real honest about this. That's a real sore point.
I'm well aware of it. We've had many conversations about it, but I do want to stress, we do view it as something that as of value in the best interests of the mall.
Right.
We also understand that you participating in this assistance is a major step on the part of the village. And, you know, we understand that commitment, and we think that commitment certainly, we would certainly release that restriction because of the commitment that the village is showing. But, you know, it's there because in a competitive market such as this, we try to give them all, and again, we didn't put this covenant in place, I appreciate you saying that, but, you know, it is there to protect them all. People didn't just come up with these things to be, you know, to be nasty. It's there to protect the business interests of the mall and trying to make the mall as viable as possible. So we do believe it is of value. We want to work with the village on releasing it as part of the final development agreement.
Okay, so it's a development agreement, not the end of construction. I think that's the question.
Yeah.
The development agreement gets signed, this would happen.
Once we have an agreement, a final development agreement,
right,
where we're all done, the restriction being released will be part of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can I ask-
That gives us a timeline.
Yeah, and I ask because Panera will be opening soon. We've got a couple of other empty ones alongside there. So that's why I was asking if sooner than later, because once they're open, we might get some more interest to come in. Joe might get those
Sure.
calls, we hope, that, you know, are interested, and we want it to be ready to go. So as Kay pointed out, we don't have to pass up, again, an offer because, you know,
Sure.
you couldn't have a cheeseburger there, you had to have a pizza.
The good news is our interests are all aligned on this. Let's get
Great.
the final agreement done as quickly as possible.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for.
All right. With that, I think we're pretty well done. So what I will do, I'm going to poll the board, and if you would like to see a resolution of inducement at our March 31st meeting, you'll say yes, and then we'll have an agreement here. But if there's not a majority that wants to see that, then I'm not going to ask Hart to prepare one. So you need to decide, do you want to see a resolution of inducement on the 31st? And this is just a polling of the board to make sure we have a majority before we get everybody fired up about this. So if you're ready, I'm going to ask each of you whether it's yes, I'd like to see the letter of inducement, or the resolution of inducement, or no, I wouldn't. Ginger?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Kevin? Paul?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Yes.
Pat? And I would also like to see one. So
Thank you very much.
There's your answer.
Thank you.
We will have one on the 31st, which we will then discuss, and now we find out we can have the Friedman come at a later date so we can ask more questions of them about the financial
As we progress.
parts of it after we do the letter of inducement, which again, for those of you that are watching, only means we want to keep working on the process. It's not a commitment, it's a let's keep this dance going. Okay, thank you very much for coming
President
out.
Ritter, thank you very much
Thank you.
to the Board of Trustees. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're very excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, you're still on.
Okay, thank you. The next item for board consideration tonight is consideration of the possibility of an Old Town Route 31 corridor TIF. And as you recall, about 3 years ago, the village worked with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning on the Old Town Plan. There were extensive public hearings. And really, this provided a guide that the village could optimize the economic development and quality of life potential and opportunities that Old Town presents. Subsequent to the adoption of that plan, and this has been adopted within our comprehensive plan, the board has consistently listed it in its goals for the village staff to really get out of the planning stage and get into the doing stage. And following that, I think it was about this time last year before the Audit and Finance Commission and then later the board, there was authorization for a study of the potential of an Old Town Route 31 corridor tax increment financing district, a redevelopment district, similar to what we have Route 25 redevelopment district. And the board authorized a contract with S.B. Friedman to do an initial analysis of this and then to come, as tonight, to present the findings to the board. Now, to set this up a little bit, what was presented by staff to the village board was consideration of developing this tax increment financing district also as a means to provide a contiguous border to the existing Spring Hill Commerce and Industrial Park TIF, because state law allows us to port fund balance out of that TIF into another TIF. So that was presented to the board, but also not just that, not just to address some of the capital planning needs in Old Town, but we also have redevelopment needs as well. I think probably the primary example of that might be, that was referenced tonight, the Huntley Square Mall at one of our prominent corners, Route 31 and Huntley Road, and as you know, that's the vacancy rate of that is very bad. So there's an opportunity to utilize what we anticipate a fund balance when the Spring Hill TIF ends in May of 2018 of approximately $4 million. So that could provide financing for some of the needed public improvements that we've recognized in Old Town. I'm just going to go over those in a very simple fashion, some of the prominent ones that we've identified. Well, first of all, we have a capital project that's coming up shortly. It's the intersection improvements at Route 31 and Huntley Road, Main Street. This is roughly about a $10 million project. There's going to be new signalization. There's going to be additional turning lanes. It's going to, I think, really address that bottleneck that comes about at that area, particularly during rush hour. That total value of that project is $10 million. Roughly about $4 million of that is the identified village share. So that just gives you a sense, if there's $4 million that's within the Spring Hill TIF, that could really just go to one project. That's just one example. Other needs that the village has identified, Washington and Maine, that's under review as a engineering phase 1 study right now. As I've referenced before to the village, that whether we do a conventional intersection improvement where we kind of blow up the intersection, add turning lanes, do a stoplight, things like that, that's still going to cost $3 to $4 million. We do not anticipate that would qualify for federal assistance, grant assistance, through the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, because while that might facilitate some of the turning movements and it might also provide a safer intersection through signalization, we don't think it would qualify because it really wouldn't move traffic. We still anticipate that there's going to be backups. And right now, at certain times of the day, as you are aware, engineers would consider that intersection as failing, meaning that the backup that's experienced on Washington or even on Main Street is not an acceptable traffic level. So that project, if that came about, and certainly my personal recommendation is the village really take a hard look at a roundabout, because I think that probably will also be the greatest cure for the intersection problems. But then in a practical sense too, if it's a $3 to $4 million project, this would enable us to provide the grant money for the village's share, which would be $600,000 to $800,000, because CMAQ is an 80-20 share. So if bringing money in from the Spring Hill TIF allows the village to leverage other money. Another example of this, within the Old Town Plan, it was recognized the possibility of the village purchasing riverfront property for a riverfront park and development of a park. That also falls within, be a great candidate for a open space land acquisition and development grant administered by Illinois Department of Natural Resources. The share of that is 50-50. So again, this is a way where if we were able to port some money from the Spring Hill Mall, or the Spring Hill Industrial Park Tax Increment Financing District, it would allow us to leverage greater dollars for our public improvements. Another example of a needed public improvement, I think it's very important for the possible redevelopment of I think, valuable land. Much of the property, the old public works side, as well as other properties along Washington Avenue, which have, I think, the potential to be some of the most valuable in the village in the sense of the nice, it's next to the bike path, it offers river views, really could be something special there. Problem we have right now is much of that has stormwater management problems. We have looked at the possibility of adding stormwater management, oversizing a culvert, similar to what we did with the Maple Avenue project. That would address stormwater management in that area, make these properties more developable. The cost of that, and we've done some very preliminary estimates of this, but Kevin Gray and Ed Sidlowski have looked at that range of $600,000 to $1.2 million. So I think you get the sense out of just the 4 or 5 projects that I've mentioned, the scale and scope of the dollars that are involved are very, very high. So this possibility of the Old Town Route 31 TIF would allow us to garner money to address some of these needs, money that we don't otherwise have. So that kind of sets it up as at least go back to what the recommendation is for the need of doing this is. But it's not just the need. When we develop a tax increment financing district, it has to be within the parameters of what state law allows. And that's where SB Friedman comes in, because they do, excuse me, a very extensive analysis in the sense of equalized assessed valuation trends. Is this an area that's gaining in EAV, or is this getting worse? They look at some of the things that Jeff Dickinson mentioned, age of property, property conditions, things like that. There are a number of criteria. So tonight, Jeff is going to report on what the initial findings were. Now, for the board, I ask you to consider his presentation, because there's a few things to keep in the back of your mind that we will be asking for your decision points from the board. And one of us, first of all, is does the village board want us to go forward with this? And then the other part is what should the tax increment financing district boundaries be? As I think I've mentioned before, tax increment financing district, somewhat like alphabet soup. Everybody might have a different recipe for it. But I would kind of consider that as you look at this, maybe 2 things in mind. One is might be considered a specific or limited purpose tax increment financing district, and that's where you pretty much have an idea of the extent of the improvements, really what you're trying to achieve. The other one might be considered what is a speculative tax increment financing district, and that's somewhat like the build it, if you build it, they'll come sentiment. That if you have a tax increment financing district, that alone will attract development and so on and so forth. A little bit of caution of that is because TIFs have a defined timeline, 23 years. So you're right, maybe development might come, but it might be in year 10 or year 15 where it doesn't provide the increment to come back and to assist some of the projects that you're looking at. And then also the other consideration for tonight, the three things that we're asking the board to think about. Should we move forward with this tax increment financing district concept? What should the boundaries be? And then finally, what is the time frame? Meaning, should we do this within, probably the quickest that we could do this is within 4 to 6 months. And I stress that there is a matter of urgency about this because of the Spring Hill TIF has the deadline of May 2018. So we're working within that timing parameter. And at that, I'll turn it over to Jeff Dickinson, who will provide the initial findings of their review.
Can I ask Joe a quick question?
Sure.
Joe, I just want to just make sure. You mentioned the property for the park that is being studied right now, along with Algonquin. You're saying we would need to apply for an OSLOD grant for that area there?
Correct. We wouldn't have to. We're saying that would be
But the TIF would provide the matching funds
Yes.
Because we would have to look at an OSLAD plan. So.
Right, I think just the scale of the expenses to what is doable, what's practical. I've also spoken with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources representative, and they also advise too that do not do not purchase the land and then try to come back for an OSLAD, because then it defeats the but-for test. If a village were able to purchase it, then they really didn't need the grant. So really what I'm suggesting tonight is just thinking about how we can maximize our investment to leverage other dollars to make our capital plans go the furthest.
Do we know if I'm just asking, Joe, you may not, do we know that OSLAD program is even available right now, given that the rest of the park grants are suspended? Will they allow an application process still to continue?
Well, right now, no. but I think all of us have been in municipal government for a long time and have watched Springfield's recognize that sometimes we're kind of held hostages in the state budget issues. But I don't believe that program is going to be dead. I think there might be a suspension today, but forever is a long time. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Before I get into the technical findings, I would like to say the preface and the homework that the village has already done, the planning efforts that we're building on here, is exactly the way that we like to do TIF districts. We being me and my firm. There's a clear strategy. A village has a vision. It's a tool to implement a broader planning agenda. The TIF planning process, and I'm a planner by training, is not a real planning process from a community visioning, goals and objectives, that sort of thing. It's a technical tool to provide a funding source. And so the fact that the village has already done all that work, staff has done that work, is a great foundation. So just that's sort of editorializing, I guess. It's not exactly my agenda, but I do appreciate that, and it helps a lot. I guess I'll start with the headline. The area that we studied, and you saw the map up there, we believe it is likely to qualify for designation. That's the short version. There are two kinds of land in this district, vacant and improved land. The state law has different rules for finding eligibility for vacant and improved. The improved land we believe will be found to be blighted. That's our preliminary findings. That's just the words and the rules in the law. All vacant land is either blighted or not blighted in the eyes of the state statute. The improved land we think is going to qualify as a conservation area. So that is the lesser of the two thresholds for improved land. It is not blighted, but it is at risk of becoming blighted. So we're not saying it's a terrible mess, but it is qualifying in that respect. So that's the headline. In order to find a conservation area, you've got to have at least 50% of the primary structures 35 years of age or older, and then at least 3 other eligibility factors. So that's the threshold we found. Otherwise, for blight, you'd have to have 5 or more factors. We don't believe that to be there. We don't believe it's a blighted area as an improved district. And then for vacant land, there's either a 1-factor or a 2-factor approach, and I'll explain our findings in those 2 categories momentarily. To the point that Joe made earlier, we do take this research very seriously. We looked at every single parcel of land, photographed it, documented it, researched historic EAV, got building age data, engineering documents and data, other plans from the village. So we try to take a holistic view of the physical conditions, the economic conditions, the historic development patterns as much as we can before we make these kinds of findings. The findings that we made at the high level here for improved land, we do have this age factor. We do have a lack of growth in EAV. We do believe we have inadequate utilities. We believe there's a lack of community planning and structures below minimum code. So that's age plus 4 currently. So it's more than the minimum of 3, but not at blight. And then we think those are the ones that we're very confident about. We looked at, currently we have a 2-factor test for vacant land. We believe there's obsolete platting of the vacant land within the district, and there's been a lack of growth in EAV for vacant land as well. There is a nuance and a wrinkle left on the vacant land finding, and I'll address that later, but what is vacant land is pretty clearly defined in the law, and we have to do more homework, I think, to get 100% comfortable that we have vacant land where we think we do, legally speaking. Obviously, we all can tell you, we can all agree what doesn't have a building on it, but the technicalities are material, and we need to get through that as part of the refinement and finalization of our findings. The first map here just shows the 2 kinds of land. The lighter gray shading is the improved ground, and the darker gray is the vacant land. That does include open space, that includes forest preserve, things like that, but that's the split. It's a mix of land, and so we looked at the eligibility, as I said, in those two different bins, and you have to find distribution of those factors across the land type. So you can't just have, all of the, the vacant land factors are in one segment, the eastern portion of the district. If they're not spread around, that's not a sufficient finding. So we had to think about distribution of both of those factors across the different land types, and we did so. We also see on this map, I guess, the mall area, which there was a discussion about a potential TIF here. It's not currently adjacent to this proposed district, and then the Route 25 TIF is also off a little bit to the east, and then we obviously have contiguity, as Joe pointed out, strategic contiguity to the north. I'm happy to field questions as I go. By the way, if there's something I'm not clear about, there's no
Yeah, I
need
mean,
to wait.
I just want to jump in. So their slides that they had the corner of Huntley and 31 where the current building is. That's mostly vacant. They had that as blue, though, I think. They were making, and when you're taking a look at this, we don't want any overlap, obviously, with their TIF. So I just want to make sure we get those boundaries right. I wanted to wait till this to bring that up.
That's a great point. I had not seen that map before, so we'll have to be, you're absolutely right. We've got to fit them at a minimum together and whatever, but they can't overlap, that's for sure.
But it was Carpentersville land, but part of it is Rouse and part of it is not. But it is all
But it was in blue,
Carpentersville.
so I don't know if they're anticipating that being part of the TIF for them, or because we have it as part of our TIF, or this 31 TIF. I just want to make sure we have that distinction.
The premise I'm coming from, and we got to talk to those folks, is we're not going to put anything in a TIF that Rouse doesn't own for Rouse. That's my first thought, but I'm ready to talk to them and listen and think. But so if it's not their land, it's probably not going to be related to that TIF. But again, it certainly can't overlap. And if they don't own Huntley Square, to my knowledge, at least. So
it's not
that's separate ownership. Anything else before we move on? Okay. So here's a little more detail on the findings. 62% of the buildings meet that age threshold, so pretty comfortably above the minimum. The EAV test, I think we've talked to board members, many of you I guess remember from previous conversations, there are a couple different ways you can get eligibility in state law. There can be a decline for 3 of 5 year-to-year periods going back in time. We have 5 out of 5 year-to-year periods where there's a decline for improved land values over those analysis period. You can also get it if there's CPI. The growth in the consumer price index is greater than the value in growth. So the state law is trying to test, are things getting worse, number one, declining, or not keeping up with inflation? And those are both, I think, good tests for, is this a tax, essentially a liability to the tax base? And we found it 2 different ways here. The minimum finding is 1. So again, we've got 2 different ways we qualify under EAV. Inadequate utilities. We've looked at utility information from Public Works and engineering folks. We do believe we've got the age of improvements. A lot of these are very old, and then there's some, it's not seepage, it's intrusion, I think is the word, I believe is the technical term. I'm not an engineer, so we're still refining that analysis, but there's some older utilities, especially in the Old Town area, where that's particularly a problem, but there is some incursion and fusion elsewhere. So we do believe we're going to find that factor for improved land. Lack of community planning requires a couple of different findings. One, that areas were developed without benefit of a plan, and Joe was speaking, I think, to some of the challenges that result from the old part of town that a lot of this is, the intersection challenges, things were built before maybe good planning or good engineering standards were in place, and we're living with that legacy. You were living with that legacy. So is it built in an unplanned manner, and were there adverse consequences? Over 60% of the properties were developed prior to the first comp plan, so just by math, we know that most of it was pre-comprehensive plan, and there are some adverse consequences that, again, I'm not going to belabor. So that's a factor we're comfortable with. And then the presence of structures below minimum code. This one is essentially a finding that we're not up to code. That is not to say that we're not, there don't need to be code violations, but if standards have been raised and we're not, the current buildings are not up to them, you meet that test. The easiest one to understand for me, at least, is stormwater code. There was no stormwater regulation until a few years ago, so there's not much detention anywhere in the district. And so, we're, technically, we're not up to code. Well, it's not illegal in any way. It's not up to code. So we do have age plus 4, as we say, so that is a conservation area finding at this stage. I've got more detail on the EAV. I'm not sure I'm going to torture you with the specific numbers, but suffice it to say we've got a decline in 5 periods and less growth than CPI in 5 periods. So it's a very strong finding in that regard. And that's usually one of the more important ones for us to find, because it gives us confidence that it's a very quantitative thing. It's not a subjective thing. It's data from the assessor. Is this a tax-based liability for the village? This is the map showing the distribution. Again, I mentioned we had to have distribution. It can't just be concentrated in one area. And there was a good, the three factors are present in the lighter gray, or the medium colored gray, I guess you would call it. And all four factors are present in almost all of the gray, really. So there's a pretty good distribution here of all those factors. Vacant land findings. As I mentioned, it's got to have no permanent vertical improvements. But the tricky bit is it can't have been used for commercial agricultural purposes in the last 5 years. In the course of our field work, and again, you all know this, some of this land appears to have been farmed. Yeah. That's where we got to do more homework. And there are certain other findings we can make, research on the history of the deeds and the history of the subdivision and so forth. We'll have to work with Hart and other folks to understand that and make sure we got it right. But you can't TIF farmland, so you have to make sure it's legally not farmland, whether it appears to be that or not. So that's the not finished business part of this homework. But assuming that we can get past that, and if we can't, we'll have to refine boundaries in certain areas potentially. We do have, we'll just have to do that work. I guess that's the short of it. But assuming that we can get through that, again, we've got this lack of growth in EAV finding, decline in 4 to 5 periods and outpaced by inflation in 5 out of 5. So again, a strong lack of growth in EAV finding. And then obsolete platting. About 40% of the parcels have strange sizes, shapes, access problems, basically not developable under current standards. If you were to draw up a map of how to, what's a building site look like, 40% of our vacant land doesn't look like a building site in some way, shape, or form. And again, that's part of the reason it's still vacant. I mean, it all sort of follows logically as to why it hasn't gotten built on. Some of it may be flooding issues that Joe pointed out that ties back to utilities. I mean, a lot of this legal technicality, it kind of helps explain some of the challenges communities have when looking at these types of areas. The other test that we don't have an answer on yet, and part of the conversation is, do we need to get one? Does the land either flood or contribute to flooding? So we don't need to find a 2-factor test and a 1-factor test. That would be a sort of a belt and suspenders approach. We would have to hire an engineer, if the village engineer could help us to make that finding, because it takes a real engineering analysis that we can't do in our house. But given the stories we've heard, the fact that we know the Fox River floods, we think it's a potential finding. It's not. We don't think it'd be a waste of time if we wanted to have that level of security. It'd be worth considering, but I can't stand before you now and tell you that you meet that test, because it's beyond my capabilities. Again, this is just the EAV table. As I said, it's 4 declines and 5 that grew less quickly than CPI. So again, 2 different ways we've got that finding that we need to make. And again, vacant land, we've got to have 2 factors for everybody. So the distribution just shows you that lack of growth in EAV and it's a finding of obsolete platting collectively, so it applies across these parcels. In addition to the eligibility findings, there are other findings that must be made. Has there been, the first one is sort of a look back question. Has there been substantial growth and development in the area? We looked at building permits data provided again by staff. Very little building activity. Again, you guys know this as well as we do, probably better. The most material improvements were public improvements by the village. So, little things got cleaned up, but nothing substantial in terms of private investment anywhere in this district over the last 5 years. We know auto engineering has done a nice job, by the way. I'm not trying to, but their improvements are beyond the window of the homework that we did. So we're not ignoring that or obtuse, but they're not in the analysis period, so they didn't show up in our math. We also had to ask the question, would development likely occur? So this is the forward-looking, the but-for test. And I think, and would that investment occur without public intervention, public tools being available? I think the plan from CMAP indicates that we need to do things to fix the ground, traffic-wise, stormwater-wise. There's infrastructure improvements, waterfront amenity improvements to catalyze redevelopment. So we believe right now that substantial redevelopment will not occur, but for public intervention. That doesn't require to make a transaction at every site, but you need to have tools to make fixes to make redevelopment occur. The TIF plan will have to be consistent with the village's comp plan. We're not making new policy here. It's a tool, as I said earlier. So we will work with you and staff to make sure that's true.
Can I ask
yes,
a question? For the vacant land, there's a 1-factor and a 2-factor. Mm-hmm. We can qualify by either one?
Yes, sir.
So the fact that it's been farmed for 5 years, that rules out factor 1?
I wasn't clear about that.
Not factor 2?
So the first test is it farmland? And the answer right now is some of it might be, some of it probably isn't. We have to settle that. Once you agree that all the land you're thinking about putting in a TIF is not farmland, then you step down to, do you meet the one-factor test or the two-factor test? And we meet the two-factor test, we believe. We aren't sure about the one-factor. We'd have to hire an engineer if we really wanted to know. But we don't need to do both of them. We need to do one or the other.
But if it's farmland, it's disqualified on both of them?
Correct. You cannot TIF farmland.
Okay.
That's right. So we,
but zoning matter?
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
It does, the test in the law is, has it been commercially farmed, used for commercial agricultural purposes in the past 5 years?
I don't think it
And
fails.
so
it doesn't matter if it was zoned industrial or anything
if someone
like
was
that.
pulling corn out of it and selling it, and it's a hard thing to test, so we usually prefer to work with counsel and get a legally rock-solid finding that diffuses that question, or exclude it. I mean, we've done that too. We said that we can't get it cleaned up, it's farmland. Okay, well then
You
it's
can
out.
save
I mean,
some
that's-
money by telling you it's been farmed for
Oh, yeah,
5
we saw it.
years.
I mean, but there are legal things that we can research that, you know, the definition of farmland has got all sorts of caveats because you know how the law works. So, you know, we've got to work through those caveats to make sure, but if we can't work around it, then it's farmland, and that's, you know, that's okay. You know, those are the rules. So, we've got to do that work, as I say. And certainly we're going to have to. Sometimes we talk to people, if it's a simple parcel and everybody in town knows it's been unfarmed for 50 years, we don't have to do that homework because we can get comfortable about it. But here, clearly, there's homework to be done in that arena. And then you've got to have a contiguous district. We've got a contiguous district, and they all have to be expected to benefit. So again, you know, the plan will acknowledge that and expect that. If you make a flooding finding, that one-factor finding, you also have to plan to make improvements to fix it. You can't just say we've got a problem. You've got to plan to fix it. So again, we believe all those tests can be met in the course of our homework. To the points that Joe mentioned at the beginning, one of the items that we need to refine, I think, still, and areas where we've got some ideas about potentially narrowing the geography of the district, where we've tested some, you know, different maths, but we obviously have to make a final decision. There is some residential land uses there in light yellow, I guess, right here in the west side, along auto engineering. Those may want to come out. You know, the parcels are really narrow there. The redevelopment potential, they're sort of up against the bluffs. And so whether they can really redevelop can really occur, can they really benefit, I guess, if I go back to the test in the law from a TIF, is an open question. Now, you can argue, and I think there's a real argument for paying for public improvements across the street. They could benefit and would benefit, but we may not need to include them all. And that's one area that we think there might be ripe for some excisions. Likewise, I don't know the best way to describe this area, Joe, the cross street around in here, I apologize, I don't have it in my... It is Rivulet, no, it's Edwards Ave, Edwards and Carpenter Boulevard, the northwest corner. There's some residential in there that we thought, yeah, no, I mean, it qualifies, but it might be able to come out again, subject to some more conversation. We may have to, or choose to, I don't think we have to do anything, but legally speaking, we could choose to knock out some of the retail up 31 north of Main Street, individual parcels. We've got to remain contiguous. We've got to respect, again, the rules and the regs, but there may be some pieces that can come out there, I guess. Those are a couple of ideas. I guess possibly the north side of the auto engineering building, north of Main, might also want to come out. So as long as we maintain contiguity, we want to think strategically about where benefits are going to be used. We want to think about where dollars are going to be spent. You know, the village is going to fix something or help fix something. We want to make sure that land is in the TIF if we can include it in the TIF. We don't want to put it outside the district. While there are legal opinions, you can still spend the money there. It's, you know, it's safer and better to just do it in the district. So those are a couple of areas that we think there may be some flexibility on the final boundary, but I think it's all about subtraction at this point. We don't, unless there's a conversation about addition, I guess you tell me, but our expectation would be it's not going to be a space bigger than this, and that those are a couple of places we would consider, we would potentially, you know, very comfortable making changes and subtractions. So once we get through that, I don't know how best to do that. Do we do that now, Joe, in a conversation, or, you know, I was going to walk through the process from here, Mark, or...
I think it'd be important to walk through the process, because staff will work with Jeff and his firm to make sure that we have a TIF district that meets the state law and that's respectful to the other taxing bodies. I mean, you haven't emphasized that.
No, that's a great point as well, right? We're not going to TIF stuff that for no purpose and that potentially is going to cause trouble with other folks, right? Either perceived trouble or, you know, economic
So if
benefit.
there is a consensus of the board directing staff to continue to work, you know, I'm taking Joe's thunder. Joe was going to ask for us to get a consensus of the board to direct us to keep working with SB Friedman to develop a TIF. And then, Jeff, if you would, give that timeline. It's not
Sure.
like we'd be voting on anything in the next month.
Sure. So the process going forward, as I say, is to finalize this boundary. You know, we can't really start writing a plan or doing math or, you know, budgeting and things like that until we have this figured out, so that's step one. In parallel, we've got to figure out the vacant land issue, President Ritter, and make sure we're not putting something in a TIF that can't be in a TIF. That's a parallel process. And then develop the plan, and then we go through the noticing and approval process. The state law, as we did before on 25, is very prescriptive and very specific, and we're going to follow those rules to the letter and spirit in every other way that we can of the law. So the time frame that we think makes sense here is to work through this sort of boundary discussion and then finalize the vacant land issues and then or identify potential vacant land issues. That we know of a couple pieces that were farmed when we were out there, so we've got to do some homework. And then we're not sure how long it takes to resolve it. There are different ways, and it's just sort of technical stuff that we can work through. Hopefully it won't take too long. It depends on ownership's participation sometimes, so it's not entirely in the village's control. For example, if we subdivide the land, we being ownership, I should say, if ownership subdivides the land, but they've got to come to the table and do that with us. You know, we can't file that on their behalf. We can do it on our land. So, you know, there's things that's why there's a TBD in there, I guess, and we've dealt with, again, if people run to the table and want to work with us on it, it can go very quickly, and if they're hard to get in touch with, at some point we have to make a decision, if they're not strategically crucial, to exclude them, a recommendation, I should say, to potentially do that. And we've done both of those things. Again, I've dealt with that, you know, at some point, either cut bait or fish, I guess, or however that goes. So that's the uncertainty in the timeline. But once we get through that, we need about 2 months to get a final plan drafted that, you know, builds off of the old town plan, bring that forward, get it cleaned up, and something that we can present to you all for consideration. And then it's essentially a 3-month notice and approval process. So that's just state law stuff. Once it's a final plan and it's on file, it takes about 3 months to do all the meetings, the letters, the meetings with the taxing bodies, before you can have really the option to adopt a TIF. So it's 6 months plus the uncertainty, I guess, and that, as I say, can go very fast or more slowly.
Okay. So, board, first we'll ask questions, and then I'll poll the board to see whether they want to continue the process. Paul?
It seems to me that we really got to seriously consider moving forward with this TIF, at least continuing the study. And, you know, I think we were really good stewards with the first TIF that we had, where we returned money back to the other taxing districts. This is probably before most of you were on the board, or some of you were on the board. I thought we did the right thing by doing that, but I think in this situation, we've got to look at what's best for the village with this. And this is a wide-ranging TIF, and it's something that's going to be new to us. I think we're familiar with retail and commercial TIFs, but to bring industrial into this, I'm very excited about that. I really see some opportunity for the village there. And those 2 vacant lands that and Ed, you rightly bring up, those are going to be important in that discussion. If we could expand our industrial base further from what it is now, I see that as nothing but a positive. That's bringing jobs to the village. And I think it'll complement what's going on not only with the Walmart TIF that we have right behind us here, but also what we're going to be participating in at this point, what appears to be with Spring Hill Mall. I think these are really, this is an exciting time to be able to take these next steps forward and really, I know it's going to be a little difficult for us, and it's going to be important. These boundary lines are very important, as you've stressed. But I just see a lot of opportunity for the village for us to move forward with this. So I would recommend that we do move forward, but I definitely want to hear what the others have to say.
Well, it would be nice to get industrial, but I think he's going to find it. The land has been farmed for many, many years, and so it's not going to qualify. The 2 farm fields are not going to qualify, I don't think, because they've been farmed for
well, I mean,
as long as I've lived here.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but if they've been subdivided, they are not farmland legally speaking from the TIF law. So that's part of the homework we've got to do. While they appear on their face to be farmland, the underlying legal condition may not be farmland. So it's not I don't have any reason to believe we might not get it all in still. I guess I wouldn't have brought it forward if I thought it was categorically impossible to get those pieces in. Mm-hmm. But we are aware that on their face they're not. Probably, we've got to do more homework to be comfortable.
Okay. And the one thing that I would like to see, but I don't know, I don't think it's possible, we've already talked a little bit about this, is that this TIF would stretch over to our Route 25 TIF, which would give us way more flexibility to move money around from one TIF to the other to where we need it. But I don't think that's a possibility, is it, to stretch
We
that
didn't look
over?
specifically. I mean, it's a residential corridor coming up the road there in my mind, and I don't know the ages of those buildings off the top of my head. We didn't pull those, but it's, I don't know how to say this. It's I don't know that it's impossible, but it seems like I mean, flexibility is a benefit. There's no question of that. So that would be the positive side of that approach. So it could be considered. I guess that would be the answer.
But there's a couple other ways to connect. At least I think there is. There would be a possibility to continue up Cleveland Avenue and still hit the.
Oh, okay, down at the southern end of
TIF
25.
there, if you-
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's older homes, not very many of them. So you might look at that one. What's Lakeview? Or is that Lakeview? After it's Cleveland and it goes through the woods, is that Lakeview?
North Lake.
North Lake, excuse me.
North Lake.
North Lake would go right up and hit the end of the Route 25 TIF, right out at 25. I'd at least like to have them look at that and see if that's a way to get over there, so we could do more porting if we needed to maybe save money and interest costs by porting over and back and forth.
That may be that may not be in Carpentersville proper to go down.
It is. One side is Carpentersville and the other side is East Dundee. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure that the north side of Lakeview is all Carpentersville. The south side is East Dundee. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure it is. Kay?
Well, I'm in favor of this TIF completely, but I don't want us to go away from our conservative views and get greedy and to where it seems more self-serving. I mean, we have very defined areas that need something, and we have residential in between that will have increase because we've done Maple Avenue. And I think that increase in property values rightly belong to the different entities that are within those taxing bodies. And then if we come to the farm area and we want to develop for industrial, I mean, we have an industrial commission. We have industry very strong here, and we would like to see that grow. So if the farmland could, by correctness, that it might be subset as far as farming, and which I believe that's what we know it is.
Pretty sure.
Then that could then be growing our industrial area in a right manner, then yes, I would be okay with including that. But as far as taking from that line, like Tamarack area, all the way up Maple to link there, I think that's stretching the properness of the TIF.
Well, yeah, my point wasn't necessarily to do it. I just would like to know if we can, and when we get to the next step where we decide the boundaries, that's when we would have this discussion.
It would make more sense if we incorporated Lake Marion Road around, if that was possible, because we do have some industry there, but not up Maple Avenue.
And we'll work with Jeff and the staff to examine both this, but as I said earlier, we're going to try to be sensitive to the other taxing bodies, because I know multiple times I've been admonished, and Joe, to consider the other taxing bodies. But we'll look at all possibilities and then give recommendations, much like the pro and con we've just heard here, and then you will be able to decide at a later date.
Yeah, if we always stay in the sense of fair play, I think that's something that, the right thing to do is just the right thing to do.
Other comments? Otherwise, I'll poll the board then, and you'll either say, yeah, I'd want to move to the next step, or we start talking boundaries, or you'll say, I don't want to do this.
Ed, one more comment before we do that. We've been talking about this for about a year and a half now. This is not something new. We've had a couple conversations within Audit and Finance to discuss this, and Joe's done this is basically what he presented to us in Audit and Finance. So this is not new. This is, but I think we are in agreement. We do need to take the next steps with this study.
Okay.
And just one final thing, we've had really major discussions in the Business Development Commission regarding this TIF, and it connecting and linking with the Old Town Plan, and not just serving for business development as far as that goes, but also residential improvements and improvements that the whole community will be able to use. That riverfront park You know, if it becomes what we want it to become, it could become even an outdoor theater similar to what they have in Naperville, if that's what the final decision is made. And that's something that those TIF monies, maybe not going back to the school district as early as they want, but they go for the entire community to be able to have more riverfront use, because it would be right there connecting in to McNamee Park and just making much broader use of that area. That's one vision of that happening.
And I think you're getting into the new business item almost.
Okay, any more comments? Otherwise, a yes means you want to continue, and no means you want this to end now. Pat, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Don?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Okay, there you go.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, you're done, right? That,
No, he's got one more.
one more.
Finally earning your money, Joe. This is good.
Well, we
Just
made
the
him
new
show up
business
for
item.
St. Patrick's Day, and he's going to make it worth his while.
You have one more, Joe? Go ahead.
That's all for the reports. We do have the new business item.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
But I promised to help you let the trustees have their say before you jump.
Yeah, I know. Actually remembered it on my own, but that's more or less a... All right, Kay, anything to report this evening?
Just for the Business Development Commission, that if our next item is approved, we will be talking about hitting the ground running with our approval of our professional agreement service with Hitchcock Design. And our next meeting is next Tuesday at 5 o'clock upstairs. That's it.
Paul?
Audit and Finance, we had 2 meetings last week on the budget. We had one on Tuesday and one on Saturday. I thought the meetings went very well. We certainly opened up the floor for anybody that could come and discuss. And, I'll get into this a little bit in my trustee report, but everybody had an opportunity to speak, and I just want to, that's something that's been the hallmark of our Audit and Finance Commission, is that we do provide that opportunity. We're looking at fund balance estimated by, and maybe take another step back, this is an 8-month budget. We are going to switch to the financials of the village to a calendar year basis beginning January 1st of next year. So this budget is an 8-month budget. It'll go from May 1st to December 31st. So that presented some challenges which staff responded to very well. We certainly had a lot of questions around that about allocating revenue between this year and next year because we are making that change, and I think they answered all those questions appropriately. We're looking at about a $46 million, little over $46 million in budgeted expenses. It's out on the website right now. It got posted today. Please go out there if you want to take a look at that. We'll have a hearing, I believe, at the end of this month. So certainly anybody can come at that point and discuss the budget as well. Some of the highlights I just want to focus on. Construction for this summer, T Road and T Lane is on the list. Sleepy Hollow Road, there'll be a redevelopment, or I should say a resurfacing of Newport Cove, which is one of our older subdivisions on the west side of the village. And then we're going to finish up all the work that we started this past summer in Glen Eagle, especially Forest View Drive. That'll get done this year. On par for next year, we discussed that already. Caddy, Wren are a couple of the streets on the east side where we're going to do some major work there. Just a couple items that I want to mention. You'll find these in the budget. In our SURF fund, that's our capital equipment replacement fund. We're going to use that to purchase another ambulance and some portable radios for the fire department. For police, we're going to re-up our in-vehicle video system. That'll be very, that's helped us a lot already, and it'll give us an opportunity to see what's going on when the officers make stops. Ballistic body armor, that's just a replacement, and we're going to see another police vehicle that will be added to our fleet. There were some other trucks and things in there. I'll bore you. We're getting some 350s and 250s, things like that that are needed in these departments. In Public Works, I think one of the most important things that we're going to see is we're going to be purchasing liquid calcium chloride, and this will be used for snow in the winter, especially on hills where it gets so cold that salt really doesn't work. We're going to get a sprayer with that as well, and a storage tank that we'll be able to mount on a truck and be able to use that. The other very exciting thing that I'm happy about, we're going to add another body to IT. And that's going to be focused just on public safety, and it's a discussion that we've had many times within Audit and Finance, is that we don't want our sergeants focusing in on IT issues when they should be leading the patrolmen. So this will free up their time, and we'll have somebody dedicated to just focusing on, obviously, putting in this vehicle system or in-vehicle video system that we want to purchase. There's going to be some work around Village Hall here. Probably replacing the paver blocks that are in front, or replacing some of those. So, and I'm just hitting the highlights, folks. So I encourage you to go out, take a look at the budget. Again, it's about a little over $46 million in expenses. We anticipate our fund balance at the end of the year be somewhere in the neighborhood of $76.3 million. So. With that, I think that's probably enough, and we'll have some more discussion, I'm sure, at the meeting at the end of the month.
But if you don't mind, Paul, just explain why we're changing to the calendar budget instead of the mid-year budget.
It's something I had always, I think it's something we've always discussed, that this is a good idea to do. It's to help us with purchasing things like insurance, letting contracts for public works, especially there. That's really the key. You know, it's much easier to have your budget in place for January 1st and then go out and get either third parties or decide to do the work in-house and then find developers that'll do that work for you. So this will give us more flexibility. We don't have to wait till the spring where we seem to be behind the 8 ball, you know, to find people to do work for us, and it just pushes our schedule, our construction schedule back. That's probably the main thing as to the reason why we're doing it. The insurance part is you know, just I think a good byproduct of that. So there's other things too, health insurance, that's a big expense. I should also mention, we're still leaving the garbage collection on your tax bill. This is something that's been focused on some outside groups that want us to split that off and make the residents pay for it on their own.
Without reducing the tax bill.
Without reducing taxes. They want to keep taxes there. I don't want to go too far, Ed. I know you admonished earlier, but that's one of the things we're hearing from different groups as ideas to expand our budget.
Okay.
Just
Thank
choices.
You. Don, anything?
No report.
Pat?
I really don't have anything except that we talked about this. I agree. Thanks, staff. It was a great budget presentation, and another smoother year as far as those of us that know from past years that it was always a little difficult. But I did want to mention we brought up the OSLOT grant and the suspension by the governor. And Mark, we had talked about getting it out on the website so that the residents can understand why the park is in disarray and, you know, we don't seem to be moving forward on it, so that there's no confusion in the background about this. The other thing I would like to do, Mark, is to somehow explain, we all know here that Carpenter Park has a trust fund, but it has a lot of dollars in it. Hitesh gave me the dollars tonight. Parks Committee is always aware of it. But it's principal, and we cannot touch it. It's an investment. All we get is the interest on that, which is very small. So, considering, so if we had to try to make up, it'd take us 10 years to at least try to recoup half of this OSLOT grant. So, I think it's important that we get that out, Mark, get it out on the site. I know Elgin, I think it was South Elgin, was in the paper. And so I'd just like our residents to know why things have come to a crashing halt there and what we need to do, and that we can't expend the trust fund's money to pay for it ourselves going forward, because it's not ours to use. So that's the definition of a trust fund. And so if we could. yeah,
Yes,
I'd
and
appreciate
in
it.
addition, for the public to understand too, that we don't want to spend dollars when the governor's office has said
Right.
to spend the project, because if we spend the dollars, we'd be in violation of getting dollars recouped from the OSLOD
Right.
project. So we're in staff negotiation with the governor's appropriate office about that whole process.
Okay.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
Okay, well, that moves us on to no old business. New business, resolution accepting a professional services agreement with Hitchcock Design Group for planning services to assist in the implementation of the Old Town Plan in an agreement amount of $38,500 plus authorized expenses not to exceed $1,500.
I'll motion.
Motion K,
I'll second.
second Pat. Joe?
Thank you. This is a recommendation. This came from the Business Development Commission, and three of the members, as well as Trustee Teeter and President Ritter, are here tonight. The thought is that to take the Old Town Plan again and turn it into an implementation plan. The recommendation from the BDC was to hire a consultant, a planning consultant, that has had a track record of doing this. I think we probably found one of the best in the area. It's the Hitchcock Design Group, which has worked in Naperville. They've worked in a number of other Midwestern cities. Interestingly, one of the strengths of their presentation is they have significant experience obtaining OSLAD grants. But basically, it's their purpose is to maximize the quality of life potential that Old Town has, as well as the economic development potential. So they'll also be coming back to the board with things such as, well, what would the board like to see of the property, the former public works site? How do you envision your community to be along Washington Avenue? But they also have experience in a number of the riverfront improvements that we've talked about in other areas of Old Town. The value of the contract is $38,000. That we have budgeted $30,000, and with the understanding it would be a multi-year project. And since we're caught in this kind of swing year between budgets, this is ample to get us going.
Comments or questions? Very important step for us. We envision the riverfront to be the future of Carpentersville, the thing that ties our community into one large functioning group. So the more we can get done down there, the more we feel it makes our community a viable and pleasant place to live. So big step here. If there are no comments, Terry, call the roll, please.
Trustee Humberto?
Yes.
Trustee Rayburn?
Yes.
Trustee Teeter?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Schultz?
Yes.
Trustee Burway?
Yes.
All right, we're ready for trustee reports. We'll start with Kay this evening.
I apologize for not making the meeting on Saturday. I did attend the other Audit and Finance Commission meeting. We had a family event already planned. So, but, this final season of my tenure. So, of course, I'll be reviewing all the information so we have a good vote on the 31st. And just happy St. Patty's Day to everybody.
Ginger?
Go Bra. I attended both of the Audit and Finance meetings on Tuesday and Saturday, as long as they were, but the presentations were outstanding again this year. And I attended the Parks meeting that we had on Monday. It's my report.
Pat?
I don't have a report this evening.
Okay, Don? Oh, we'll
Almost
get him
done.
in a minute. Go ahead.
Paul? Yeah, just talking with residents, just some questions that they had I want to bring to the attention of the manager and the rest of the board. And a resident asked about how our property values are rated in Zillow, and is there anything that we can do? She thought that we were unfairly being reduced. And I've been out to the site, and you know, it does, they are pretty low. I don't know what we can do, but she asked if there was something we could maybe make a phone call, see what they're, you know, do we understand why they're doing this? I don't know if, I said I would bring it to manage, you know, the managers, see if there was any help there, you know, if we can find it.
I'll have to research that.
Okay.
I don't know how we could impact that, but if we can, we'll talk to the
Yeah.
law firm and other economic development directors and find out.
Mm-hmm. Another resident brought up Tulsa's being used, of course, since it's been repaired, is now being used for a mini cut-through from 25 to Lake Marion.
Absolutely.
And cars hitting some pretty high speeds in between there. And she asked if there was something we could do. Of course, we discussed, she brought up the speed bumps, which we know we really can't do with the plows, but maybe perhaps some stop signs is something that we should consider. So I promised I would bring this up. This is, you know, that could turn into, you know, a problem down the road, and want to avoid that. And it does seem to happen. I mean, even where I live off of Miller Road, you know, my neighbor said to me, you know what is going to happen now, Paul, once you got this road fixed, is everybody's going to fly down the road. So we have our officers out there. I see them out there at the corner of Miller and Providence, getting cars to slow down a little bit. And we still continue to get these questions about, and concerns from residents about the speeding going on throughout the village. So at the Audit and Finance, I do want to touch a little bit on Audit and Finance Commission. Guys, I feel we try to bend over backwards to try to get people to come and provide input, ask questions. The numbers, it's black and white. You look at the numbers, if you consider everything that we talk about, you know, I think we do a good job of explaining why we make decisions the way we make decisions and what information that we use. And some of the biggest critics, you know, right now don't even show up to this meeting, and it's a little frustrating that they don't even bother to show up, and yet they have a lot to say with how we budget our for our village. And, you know, they want, you know, it's interesting because one of them wants to have private meetings. Now, to me, that's not being very transparent. We have an Audit and Finance Commission for a reason, and that's to come and discuss this and understand what's going on. But if you don't bother to show up, you got to wonder how serious you are about your concerns. So I'm sorry, Ed, it's frustrating to me that I open this meeting up. I constantly get warned by people that are on the board, don't let people go too far, and it's never happened up to this point. I've never had to stop somebody from doing something. But it's, I'm sorry, I'm venting a little bit, but,
yeah.
But I wish, you know,
As long as
I want
it
the
doesn't
residents.
get political, I would
Well,
say.
I guess I want the residents to know when you hear something, take it with a grain of salt. You know, we've discussed this thoroughly, and I'm disappointed that we're still hearing it, but even tonight I had a conversation with one of our biggest critics out in the hallway and asked, you know, where were you on Saturday? And had other things to do. So I'm sorry, I can't help you then. You know, it's not that serious. I guess you're not that serious about your concerns. So maybe I'm wrong, but we're going to continue to have open meetings for audit and finance. I appreciate the commissioners, that Brad, Humberto, Paul Lanspa, as well as Kevin and Don, Ed. All of us sit on this commission, and the trustees show up, and there should be no surprises. I don't like surprises. I want everything to be laid out in black and white. And if you have it, I mean, people have come and offered ideas, and we've discussed them, and we'll continue to do that. You'll have another opportunity, probably in September, October this year, to discuss the budget again. And I hope that some of you will show up. So,
thank you.
Excuse me, Ed. And I apologize. I was just reminded of something, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to mention, too, that there'll be a meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at Public Works Building for Tom Rickard, our Director of Transportation from King County, will be talking with the residents from Bowles
Oh,
Road.
that is tomorrow
Yes,
night and not
yes, and-
Thursday
yeah,
night?
No, and then, no, there's another meeting on Thursday. But this will be the one with the county, where Tom had offered when he was here to speak with the residents along Bowles Road.
So I had them backwards. The one on Thursday is something else.
Yes, it is. So this is tomorrow at Public Works, 6 o'clock.
Well, I won't be there because I'll be in Springfield.
Yeah.
Don, do you have anything? Trustee report?
Well, I was going to bring up that,
Oh,
about the
okay.
meeting, but that's good. You did. Do we want to discuss the one on Thursday night too?
No, I don't think so today.
Okay.
Yeah, so It's been out.
Okay.
It's out. So.
Anything else for trustee report?
Oh, that will be it. Thank you.
Kevin?
Some good news in the village. Panera Bread is opening Friday, March 27th at 6 a.m.
Oh, there you go.
Drive-through and everything. So I know the community is very excited about that. It's an excellent part of town. I really hope that they will open and sort of show how viable a business can be in that area, and they can really help dovetail with what we've been talking about tonight. Another thing I'd like to bring up, I attended the Audit and Finance meeting last Saturday and was very excited to learn of a Quadcom initiative that could shave as much as 45 seconds off of a response time. That's something that is always at the forefront of conversations here in the village. It's something that dictates our spending levels for emergency services. So it's something that we're always very cognizant of. It's always something that we're weighing. And you can see municipalities throw a lot of money in efforts to reduce their call time. And it really showcases how, when I sit up here and I talk about how we need to be innovative, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is something that is an advancement in technology, something that we weren't doing before. There are no pension costs associated with this technological improvement. So, at least not that I'm aware of. So, this is something that, these are the types of strides that we need to make as a village to be responsible stewards of the taxpayers' money. 45 seconds off a call time is a huge amount of time if that proves to be successful. Now, obviously, this hasn't been implemented yet, so it's not something that can be counted on, but the initial expectations are very exciting to me, so I just wanted to make the residents aware of that. And then, lastly, I just wanted to say that I was disappointed to learn about the OSLOD grant funding suspension for Carpenter Park, but at the same time, I certainly understand why. You know, things are terrible in the state when simple playground equipment becomes a victim of the public pension debt crisis. I'll put it bluntly, I don't want to live in a state that values pension spiking over playground equipment, and I hope that the residents don't either, because I don't want to have to leave.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in a state that doesn't have parks. So, you know, it's a suspension, it's not a removal of the funds, but at the same time, it's disappointing that this has happened. We have a bunch of construction fencing around a park that should be being improved as we speak. And I certainly won't sit here and defend any of the current spending priorities in Springfield. I'll leave that to the people who got us into this mess and continue to think that the status quo will somehow get us out of it. That concludes my report.
Okay. Yeah, when I leave the meeting tonight, I have to drive down to Springfield, so tomorrow I can try to talk to as many legislators as possible to see if we can make some sense out of all the spending suspensions and all the other things that are happening. I really think it's that most of it will go away once there's an agreement amongst all the parties as to how we're going to get through this, and you know, the governor has a specific set of goals, and I'm sure the leaders of the legislature have goals, and once they all get out there, and I think we'll see a resolution. I hope we will, but that's I'll go aside from that. One of the other good things that came out of the Audit and Finance is that we're going to put a 4th ambulance in service. We will now, instead of having 3, have 4, and we'll have 2 out at Station 2 on Lake Marion, which has the highest volume, has 50% of the volume we'll now have 50% of the ambulances. It is a spare ambulance, but I assume when we get the new ambulance, we're going to have 4 plus a spare instead of 4 in service. But that will be a wonderful addition to reduce times and give us more flexibility in getting ambulances, which are a vast majority of our calls are for ambulances. So having an extra ambulance in service is a wonderful thing. I want to thank you, Director Pop, for making that happen. That's a great addition. I don't know who made it happen, but I'll give you the credit.
Team made it happen, but
There you go.
It's the working team. I understand that. I did attend the candidate forum last week. It was very informative. I don't know. I think there's a video of it, but I don't know who has it available. Does anybody know where the video from the forum is?
I think it's on the
League of Women
League of
Voters?
Women Voters.
Okay,
They
so if you-
filmed it. They filmed it and put it up on their site.
So if you did not get to go to the forum, you could go to the League of Women Voters, and you can see a film of the ECC debate and the Carpentersville debate. I am a member of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus on diversity issues. We're trying to look at ways so we can help out people that are new to the community for whatever reason. So that's just developing. I'll have more to say about it as I go to more meetings, but a lot of really good ideas there to help people out, help them become accustomed and get their Social Security number, all those little things that people don't think about when somebody moves into the country new. But we'll see where that goes. Our ideas for gaming money, that's starting. If you have an idea of something that would improve life in the village, you can go on the website and you can look up, when does that start, Joe? 1st of April?
I believe so, yeah.
1st of April, you could start submitting ideas, but I think the ground rules and stuff are there already. We're really looking for ideas, things that would improve quality of life in the village. And
It'll be in the upcoming newsletter.
right, it'll be in the newsletter. That's right. That's a good thing. The manager and assistant manager and I attended a community a meeting today with the school district. They were informing us about different programs that could affect us as a village and all the other villages in the school district. One of the key proposals is all-day kindergarten for any kid that wants to go, plus eventually pre-K that would be sponsored by the school. There's so much information about how much early childhood education makes a difference for kids. So our superintendent wants to have full-time kindergarten and at least part-time pre-K to start and eventually full-time pre-K as well. By volunteer, you can't require kids to go to kindergarten, but you can offer it on a full-day basis. They also talked a lot about industrial ed and plans that they have. They're going to have a magnet-like program at Hampshire that any kid in the district can go to Hampshire and get industrial training. They're going to have an entrepreneurship program at Dundee Crown to teach kids how to start a business, how to be businessmen, how to make a future for yourself. And they're starting a new dropout prevention program or intervention. So if they feel like a kid's going to drop out, they have special resources that they got a grant for that will, I think that was the one that was a grant. There were a number of programs, but I think that was the one that had funding to have dropout intervention and try to keep kids in school. All things that are critical to us because we do know we have a high number of people in Carpentersville without high school diplomas. It's a recognized weakness in our village that we want to work with the school district to prevent. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and then we're ready for executive session. Items 2C1, 2C2, and 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act. I need a motion.
I'll motion.
Motion K.
Second.
Second Ginger. Terry, call the roll.
Trustee Rayburn?
Yes.
Trustee Teeter?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Schultz?
Yes.
Trustee Burroway?
Yes.
Trustee Humper?
Yes.
Adjourn to executive session.